DJI Air 2S. Is it the real deal? Is it worth it? Should you buy it? Or is it just another money grab by DJI and you should just hold out for the Mavic 3? Let's talk about it. Let's have a drink of water. Alrighty, DJI Air 2S. So just to give you guys a little bit of context, my drone before this one was the Phantom 4 Pro, and I love that drone. It served me really well over the years, but I found that it was kind of huge and I wanted something smaller. That's when the Mavic 2S. Dude, I can't even pronounce the name of this thing. Like Mavic Air 2S. Okay, here we go. I'm struggling here, so bear with me. Take two. The 5.4K footage kind of won me over, and eventually I pulled the trigger and I got the drone. The biggest thing that I noticed about this drone was, in terms of upgrades, was the flight characteristics. And I always kind of like wrote this off. I was like, yeah, I mean, all DJI GPS drones are pretty good. Like, but comparing the new footage to some of the previous drones I've flown, it's way steadier. It's really noticeable when I'm doing hyperlapses, when I speed up the footage. It's like, the footage is so buttery smooth. So I don't know if it's the gimbal or just the overall motors, and DJI has refined their product over the years, and that's what's making it so steady, but the end result is amazing. I know if I have to do hyperlapse, I don't have to apply like tons of warp stabilizer to make it smooth. It's already gonna be real steady. The 5.4K footage is kind of like a cool, it's like a selling feature, you know. It sounds great on paper, but it looks great as well. The downside, the biggest downside, is there's no active tracking. And the active tracking in this drone is actually phenomenal. But you do lose it when you step up. Even 4K 60, you don't have active tracking. And for certain shots, I find that super helpful. It's also a good idea to practice those moves on doing it like manually, so you're a better, more experienced pilot and you can perform under pressure as well. There's definitely some drawbacks with this drone. It's not the flagship model. I think we're gonna have to wait for the Mavic 3 Pro or Pro 3, whatever they're gonna call it. And that'll probably have even bigger showstopper features than this. But for now, this drone really fulfills all my needs in terms of aerial, video, and photography. The 10-bit log footage is honestly amazing. I find it grades really well with my FX3. It looks so rich, the colors are so vibrant. It is only a 420 chroma sampling. I can't complain. I'm coming from an 8-bit drone. Like, for me, this looks awesome. And if I gotta tweak the colors to look a certain way, I have that ability. The variable aperture is kind of like a big sticking point for me. Like, I really love that on the Phantom 4 Pro, but I have to say it's not that big of a deal. Just because it comes with those NDs, I bought the Fly More package, you get the nice NDs. It is a little bit more time. You gotta fiddle with it, put it on. It is a bit annoying, but I gotta say that the thing that I can confidently do now with this drone that I wasn't able to in the past is bump the ISO a little. Like even 400 ISO on some of these older DJI drones, nah, you can't even get away with that. But on the Air 2S, I was using 800 ISO or 1600 ISO at night, and yes, there's some noise, but it's acceptable. So for me, having the ability to bump that ISO just a little bit to make sure I can get a usable shot is so much more important than, oh, I gotta land the thing and change the ND. Whoop-de-doo. And you know what? Having that low shutter speed that the ND allows you to do is oftentimes overrated, because how often do you really see motion blur in drone shots? Like if you're flying up in the sky somewhere, like getting a vista, you're not gonna perceive any motion blur. Only flying close to things at a high speed, you will see that. So for those situations, definitely try to stick with a lower shutter speed. But in the grand scheme of things, bumping the shutter speed up a little bit higher is not gonna destroy your footage. So when I first got the drone, I headed to a shoot at this abandoned gas station and about to get this establishing shot of my buddy Boca SP, and as I'm coming down, I hit this ledge and I just about crashed the drone into him. Luckily it missed him, he dodged it, but it was pretty sketchy and I was kind of like, man. After that, I haven't gotten close to crashing it, and the obstacle avoidance has actually been very reliable. The one thing I did notice is when I was flying in a dusty bando and I landed it like right on the ground, and the next few flights I kept getting this error like gimbal overload, and I was like, man, what the hell is this? And it turns out that some kind of dust or tiny little pebble went inside the gimbal. So I just put some, like, not compressed air because you don't want to damage it, but like I blew some air in there and cleaned it out, and I haven't been getting the error message. So when you're taking off and landing, try to keep in mind, don't do it off a dusty ground if you can, or use a landing pad. The connection is actually really solid on this drone. You can fly it out pretty far and even behind objects, and the connection stays solid, so that was a big improvement. What I did notice though is quite often it does disconnect. So when the drone disconnects, it's kind of like the screen goes blank. And the other day I was flying it over the river and all of a sudden it just cut out and it didn't reconnect for a while, and I was actually tripping. I was like, man, did I just like hit a power line, or like what happened? But luckily it reconnected, and it was already on the return home mission, so it would have been fine, but still it was like a nerve-wracking moment having the drone up in the air, like no connection. It sucks, but it did happen a few times, so I wanted to mention it. At the end of the day, this is an awesome drone, so if you're thinking about upgrading, I can wholeheartedly recommend it, unless you're coming from like a Mavic 2 Pro. There's not really that much of an appeal, but even if you just want the newest, the latest, I think you won't regret it. It's been a lot of fun. I've been getting great footage, and I just take it with me in more places just because of the portability, the size. It's really a big thing for me. So there you have it. That's kind of some of my thoughts on this drone. Is there anything I'd like to see improved? Always better range, but I feel like DJI is just constantly improving it. Oh yeah, the Fbv mode on this drone is actually pretty good. In previous drones I've tried it on, I was like, as soon as you're like not turning, it just jumps back to like the original horizon, and it just doesn't look that great. But with this one, you can actually do banking turns, and it looks pretty good, and it's not as jerky as previous versions of it. So I've been using that quite a bit to add a little bit more dynamic look to the shots. So I want DJI to definitely expand on that and give us more control, make it even smoother, and just so we can get different types of looks, because the straight locked off horizon, while it's great, it can get kind of repetitive. So anything that can mix up the footage and give more variety, I'm happy to take it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think of this drone in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel, support, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.